It's all about the data. It's all about the insight. To start with a small group of people and to kind of grow to what we've done with the business, I think, has been like a really exciting journey.
But I still don't think there's enough of a push to really help people understand their finances. I think coming into a cashless society now, we used to visibly see our money, and now we don't really have visibility of it anymore. And I think that's kind of one thing I see Moneyhub does so well.
We need the regulator to demand more of us. To me, the fintechs are always driving innovation and creating that edge, so that, that challenge and edge, which is, we absolutely need. I would like to see a little bit more of, the fintech being enabled by the incumbents together to achieve more. My goal, if you like, would be that in the not too distant future, we don't actually have to think about, or stress about what we should be doing with our money.
Sam, welcome to Fintech Diaries.
Well, thanks for having me.
We're so excited to have you join us on the podcast today, and we're just really excited to hear about your career journey, learn about Moneyhub, and all the exciting things you're doing in the industry. I think to kick us off, it'd be great if you could give a bit of an introduction to yourself and give us a bit of background to Moneyhub.
So for myself, I guess I would start by saying in a massive summary that I really feel the consumer, which is us, all of the three of us, just needs more help with their money. As in, I really think it's still a black art in terms of financial services, and we're really lucky to be in the industry. But if you're not in the industry, which I had experience of, obviously not being from financial services all my life, and the difference, if you're not from the industry. So for me personally, it's all about trying to help make that difference for people. And obviously at Moneyhub, I get to do that, which I think is fantastic. So Moneyhub being an aggregator of all your finances in one place. And then that means we can provide insight, and we can help our enterprises that we service to help them with their customers, or we can help people directly. It's all about the data. It's all about the insight. And then obviously payments as well, just to make it really slick when you want to be able to do something.
Lovely. So financial wellness is what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Would love to take it back to sort of the start of your career as Sam. You mentioned you weren't always in fintech, but I know you've got lots of years in fintech. So take us right back to the start. Tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I've probably got to give my dad and my uncle a bit of credit because when I was at school, I decided that it would be good to be a nurse because all my friends were going to be a nurse. And it was my uncle that said to me, "You're not going to make a good nurse." And I'm like, "What do you mean I'm not going to make a good nurse?" It's like, "What? I still think I would make a good nurse." So he said to me, "No." He said, I think you would enjoy doing something else." He said, "Have you thought about anything else?" I'm like, "No." So he sat me down with the paper in those days and took me through all the jobs from A to Z. And it was the systems analyst that interested me. So I was probably studying the equivalent of my GCSEs, if you like. So I went and he said, "Well, you have to go and talk to your computing teacher about that." So he did, and that's how I ended up, obviously doing my degree in computing rather than being a nurse. And then I guess my dad, because when I finished school, I was also determined to go and be a jump rider for the local racehorse trainer because I thought that would be fantastic, right? And he was very clever because he obviously knew my obsession with the horses. But he said, I can still remember him saying to me, I said, "I don't actually care what you do at uni." I said, "I actually don't care." He said, "You can do knitting 101. And he said, "But you are going to uni." And he said, "Because if you go and hurt yourself with these horses, you will need something to fall back on."
Quite literally.
Yes, exactly. But I think he was quite clever because he got me to go to uni, knowing full well by the time I finished uni, I probably wouldn't want to ride racehorses every morning at 5 o'clock in the morning for a tenner. So, and I think he probably just crossed his fingers, and he was right. So by the time I finished uni, I was obviously then thinking I would probably not do that for a living.
Amazing. And talk us through how you went from there then to becoming the CEO of Moneyhub.
Yeah, so it's like we've talked about, isn't it? It's quite a checkered journey, isn't it? Which I think that's nice. I think it brings a lot more to your role when you get to do these things. So started by just being a graduate programmer for Telstra, which is the equivalent to BT. So, and they were fantastic because I got a lot of training. In fact, one of the courses that they insisted on as part of your graduate program was a presentation skills course, which like I was just mortified. And literally I kept putting it off. So because there was a lot of graduates, so they would send you in, you know, 4 groups of 4 to this course. And I was like, oh no, I'll go on the next one. And then my boss, I can still remember him saying, there's only one more. So he's like, you know, that's it, you're on it.
Yeah.
And I was so mortified, but it was so good for me because I got to actually, you know, practice and learn and maybe have some of the scary bits about presenting kind of, you know, knocked away.
Yeah.
Like at quite a young age, right? So that was a bonus, and then obviously from there I was had another deviation because I obviously love my horses, did keep riding, didn't obviously ride the race horses, and then was longlisted for the Sydney 2000 Olympics, but the Australian Federation would only shortlist you if you had competed internationally. You didn't have to stay competing internationally, but you had to kind of tick the box, which meant the UK or the US. And I thought that was a ridiculous idea to fly a horse halfway around the world so that you could tick a box and maybe get picked for a team. I just thought it was crazy. And it was my husband that said, when you're in your rocking chair, he said, do you want to think about the things you have done or the things you could have done? And it was like a light bulb moment.
Yeah, it's such a good saying.
And I thought, he is absolutely right.
Yeah.
So that was it. It was like we packed the horse, myself and everything off. Obviously you get help to do it, but they don't fund it. So, and so that was a journey in itself, actually, bringing a horse, you know, to the UK, landing in a country. I'd never been outside of Australia. We you know, I'd been to Bali. That was it, you know, literally. Wow. So, you know, it was a big change for me and I really enjoyed it. Like we landed here. We were here for 2 years, you know, supposedly, and then we were going home. And we've never gone back. Yeah. And then I didn't get into the team in the Sydney 2000 Olympics. So I was did get shortlisted in the group of 12, but my dressage wasn't quite good enough. My jumping was good, but my dressage wasn't quite good enough. And I found that soul destroying, actually. And I thought, I can't live my life every 4 years, you know, in this way. I thought it's going to kill me. So that's when I went back to kind of work, really. And that's what took me into financial services, because I was fortunate to go into a job with financial services. And I can still remember my first meeting with my colleagues, and we were in a Barclays meeting, and I never said a word, and I came out and I said to them, so we've got a big problem here, because I didn't understand a word you said. Like not one word in that meeting.
Oh, wow.
And that's where I think I still remember what it must be like to be a consumer with money, because like I don't think we realise how much when you're in the industry, you become familiar and comfortable with how we do what we do.
Yeah, and I think that's great that you challenged it so early on, because I feel like, you know, going into finance, say on a grad scheme early on, everyone's talking in that jargon, you don't understand what's going on, but you feel a bit nervous to kind of say it because you feel that people are going to call you out, like, how do you not understand it? But it's exactly right. That's exactly what the consumer must think. And, you know, if we want to have better financial services and products for consumers, it needs to be easily understood by them. So it's really good you were calling that out from day one.
Has to be, yeah. So wow, it's so interesting. You packed your bags and you moved here, and you've had a kind of a shift in your career direction, and now you've been the CEO of Moneyhub for 8 years. I mean, obviously that just speaks for itself. I think also your kind of, you know, resilience in terms of, you know, coming here and doing the horse riding and kind of facing that kind of like initial failure, and actually now being kind of that successful as CEO. How do you think that sort of translates in terms of the skills that you have now and the skills that you have to have as a CEO?
Yeah, so I think you're right. I'm really fortunate because some of the training that went in to be kind of like a top sports person, which the Australian Olympic Committee, you know, put a lot of effort into, as you can imagine, they're quite serious about their sport. And they like winning. So put a lot of effort in. And I believe some of that psychological training we had has held me in good stead in the role I'm in now. So it is interesting how you can take from other completely different, you know, learnings and circumstances. But things like, you know, in effect, making decisions, like quickly, like if you think about when you're riding, you know, or sports, you're making decisions all the time, and you can't start overthinking whether you play tennis or it doesn't really matter what it is. The minute you start overthinking something, you actually go backwards really fast. So there's lots of things like that. And then on top of that, just coping with pressure. So the techniques they teach you to cope with pressure must have helped me, like at times in the role I'm in, without me even knowing.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, because you've been CEO, is it, for over 8 years now at Moneyhub? I mean, that's a long time in terms of CEO lifespan, because I feel normally you see people kind of chopping and changing quite a lot. How has Moneyhub, in your eyes, changed and developed over that 8 years? Because it's now such a powerhouse in the open banking, open finance industry.
Yeah, it's been an amazing journey, actually, because, you know, we started with 12 people. So
Wow, 12.
Yeah, and it's just like such a small group. And sometimes I can't imagine how it was ever that small. Do you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't seem possible. But then other times it feels like yesterday when there was just a few of us. So I think to start with a small group of people and to kind of grow to what we've done with the business, I think, has been like a really exciting journey. Because the one thing that is hard to understand about Moneyhub is it is like such a clever platform in terms of its technical ability, and it's not relevant to one specific thing, because it's so kind of what I call multi-sector, multi-industry. It sits across, because it's actually at one level it just consumes data from anywhere, you know, into it. So it's quite agnostic. It doesn't know it's consumers' financial data that it's doing. You know, it doesn't really care. But then what that means is the use cases for it are amazing. So we had to kind of really explore what are the use cases that we think Moneyhub should focus on. And that's got to be what problems do people want to solve. You know, it can sometimes be things you want to do because you think, oh, that'd be good. But if no one's ready to do that or buy that, which honestly, I find that like incredibly frustrating, because I can see things that I think, oh, we should do this. But if the industry isn't ready to do that, it doesn't actually matter that would be good for the consumer. It's not going to happen. So you've got to weigh that balance up, haven't you? All the time.
Yeah, the industry has definitely changed over the last 8 or 10 years. And I think we can see some developments, but I still don't think there's enough of a push, I think, to really help people understand their finances. I think coming into a cashless society now, we used to visibly see our money, and now we don't really have visibility of it anymore. And I think that's kind of one thing I see Moneyhub does so well, is kind of give you that visibility. Here's everything you have across your pensions and your investments and your current accounts and all of that. I just think it's so useful as a consumer, but I just wish there was more being done to facilitate that B2B to C sort of.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think it's difficult because if you think about the industry, we are so siloed. You know, we're credit cards, we're current accounts, we're savings accounts. You know, I have to say, there was a time when I worked with one of the banks when I was in Towers Perrin, and I can still remember we did some work with their investment and their ISAs and onboarding. And I remember saying, not everyone will invest, so why don't you have something on this site that sends them to your cash ISA? You know, if you kind of if you're not comfortable still after all we've done, you know, there's the cash ISA, you know, like, and send them, no way. And I was like, what do you mean no way? And they're like, well, that's the cash ISA team, and like over my dead body, am I giving them one of my customers that we've paid for, earned, you know.
God.
So the competition in one company between the investment ISA team, if you like, and the cash ISA team was so. But that's we've created that from how we reward people, how the P&Ls are set up, and some of that goes back 200 years. So you can't blame the people in the businesses today that are, you know, reacting to that. But it does, to your point, say needs to be quite a strong shift to break that down. Yeah. And it is the silos, I think, that we have in the industry which prevents us from being more customer centric.
Yeah. What do you think could be done to move that along? Is it just regulation, or do you think there's so much more that could be done by companies or individuals to move that along?
Well, I'd like to think we were better at moving things along without regulation, but it's not what I've seen. Yeah. I think for the UK particularly, we need the regulator to demand more of us. I mean, the fact that we've had treating customers fairly for a number of years and they've had to kind of up that to consumer duty actually upsets me. Yeah. Like, we shouldn't need that, should we? Shouldn't actually need consumer duty, should we?
should be something we're already doing.
Anyway,
but the fact it's there shows it's clearly a gap and shows there's kind of an issue, and shows that, you know, sometimes it does take a bit of regulation to kind of move things along in that way. Because I think one of the areas, I know you're on the pensions dashboard, that I think is really interesting, because actually I have the Moneyhub app, and actually being able to see my pension now is something I've never considered, but it's so important. You know, the retirement age rising, cost of living, you've got to think about the future, and it's just never really been something that I think, you know, everyone, like, you know, has 5%, 4% going from their salary and then forgets about it, but, you know, it should be accessible. You should be planning for that. So I'm excited for kind of developments in that area as well.
I think pensions is just such a, like, questionable topic for young people. I don't think it's explained enough. There's no real financial education around it. And, you know, as a young person, I kind of changed roles a couple of times, and I've got different pension pots, and at the moment I still don't know where are my pensions. But Moneyhub today, actually, I connected with my Igon and with my Royal London, and it's amazing how many integrations are actually possible as well from that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think personally, I think it was a criminal offence to do auto-enrolment without pension dashboard. So you shouldn't really have auto-enrolled people into a pension and not enable them to see it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So to me, the two should have gone hand in hand, and we're a long way behind. Don't get me wrong. I think auto-enrolment is the saviour of a lot of people's, you know, future retirement, because without it, they'd have nothing. So I'm a big believer in auto-enrollment, but not without, to your point, the visibility and the transparency where, you know, you need to engage with it, because these are no longer, provisions or products that are provided by the employer or, you know, by any other, you know, means. These are for you to look after now. These are your investments. So although they're investing on your behalf and doing the best they can, it's still completely your responsibility to get from A to B. Yeah. And to your point, I just don't think that is clear at the moment. No.
How do you find sort of as the industry obviously it is growing, you've got sort of the incumbents and the financial institutions and the fintechs of the world, the startups. How do you kind of see that kind of supporting the industry in such a way of pushing us further along that sort of space?
So I think the fintech community is brilliant because it demands more from the suppliers that they're working from. So, you know, like what they need in order to try and close a gap that they've seen and that they will go after really hard. So to me, the fintechs are always driving innovation and creating that, is it like that edge, you know, so that, that challenge and edge, which is, you know, we absolutely need. The only thing is, sometimes to make a real difference to people, especially in financial services, we need some of the big incumbents to embrace it, because they, by the definition, could almost overnight transform people's lives because of their reach, because of the trust that they have, because of what they've built up from those 200 years. Yeah. So I would like to see a little bit more of, you know, the fintech being enabled by the incumbents to together to achieve more, whereas I still think we're probably not seeing quite as much as we could on that front.
Yeah, no, exactly. Definitely. And obviously we know Moneyhub is at the forefront of innovation and driving change across the industry. What's next for Moneyhub? What's your kind of long-term vision or goal, or kind of what do you see it kind of doing in the next kind of 10 to 20 years?
So we have this triangle, which, you know, is best explained like as Maslow's hierarchy, you know, of needs, where you start with, you know, the basics and then you kind of work your way up. And at the top of the triangle is what is the next best thing to do with my money, which would be automated. So my goal, if you like, would be that in the not too distant future, we don't actually have to think about, you know, or stress about what we should be doing with our money. That actually there is the ability for something, you know, like Moneyhub to tell you what is the next best thing to do for you at that time where you're at in your journey, and also perhaps, you know, if you've got a couple of options, what they are and why. I would just love that ability, and I think it should be like effortlessly available to you. Yeah. It should be in your pocket. And it should be something that is available to everyone.
I think definitely it's like open banking, open finance, open data, open options, open everything. Just being able to have that understanding of what the insights mean at that very moment would be
There are some decisions that I would have made in the course of my life, even though I'm in financial services,
100%.
that would have been different and would have been better if I'd had a fraction more insight at the time.
Yeah.
And I think I even asked for it. Do you know what I mean? I was very curious, but I think the industry's very cautious about what they tell you and how they tell you in case they get in trouble. Like it's a very cautious industry, which ironically, with your money when you're young, you actually shouldn't be cautious. So you really need to understand that actually taking more risk when you're younger has massive benefits. But some of this has become more obvious as I've got older. So it seems a bit of a shame that we can't impart that knowledge sooner the better.
Definitely. I think Gen Z as well, the younger generations are a lot more open to learning about their finances. I don't know about you, Lydia, but when I was younger, I don't think I gave it that much thought. And I think that was probably part of the problem, that now I'm kind of in the age where, I'm now working in fintech and working in financial services. I have that access to knowledge. But for people that aren't, they have much less, understanding of actually what their finances and what their financial state looks like.
I think there's an interesting piece as well around the automation AI piece, because I think it brings so many benefits. The automation movement of money, can really take away the thought process, do things quicker. But also with the use of AI, things like ChatGPT, there's also the worry that people get too reliant on it and don't understand like the core concepts kind of underneath. So it's kind of like, how do we make sure we kind of look at those two together? Yes, people have those options in the AI, the automation to make things slicker, more intelligent, but also they still understand what it's doing and like what's behind it.
Yeah, and that's always a challenge, isn't it? I do think we probably have to accept that, first of all, we really need to help people like make more informed, better decisions without having to understand. Without having to understand much. So the analogy I use is, if you'd said to me when I got my driving license, you've got to take the engine apart and put it back together, I'm like, I'm out.
Yeah.
I don't want the license. And it's not that I couldn't put an engine back together. It's just I have no desire to take an engine apart and put it back together. It's like, I'm done. And yet there's this other group, isn't there? They're like, oh, brilliant. Get me on that engine. Let me take it apart, put it back together. And then they get magically to have their license, right? I feel a little bit like that with our industry. We kind of get a bit obsessed about wanting everyone to understand everything. I do wonder if sometimes there isn't a segment that actually they really just need to know what's the best thing to do to keep them, in effect, making their money work as hard as they can, while perhaps they go and do what they do and enjoy. And actually, we're never going to get them to kind of want to know a lot more. But I don't want them to miss out. Yeah. So I don't want them to not have a license because they just weren't that interested. You want them
to get the benefits, even if they're not.
Like, I still feel we shouldn't make the bar too high or anything, or get tied up in knots about the fact, because if you think about it, you can drive a car just as well without understanding that engine as you can with. In fact, I'd argue maybe we're better when we're, not, what is it, racing car drivers, so
autopilot.
So I just think it's something we obsess in the industry about, like the knowledge, which I do want people to make more informed decisions, but I'm not 100% sure you need to know all the intricacies of our world to do that.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed. Just want to take you sort of towards the topic around kind of diversity, women in fintech. I know you're a big advocate for that. So I want to get your thoughts from, any personal experiences that you've had throughout your career journey that has really stood out to you.
Something you don't want to know about.
We do, actually. Whatever you're willing to share, obviously.
Well, so one thing that is good, if I look back when I started my career and where we are now, we have definitely moved on. So that is brilliant. So when I started my career, which was in Australia, so it's not, the UK's, which I think tells you the world has moved on. So, graduate, Telstra, a graduate programmer, and obviously in a very male-dominated, segment. I think there were three of us girls, and probably in 30, in a team of 30. So, and obviously I still can't remember what it was, but it was a big event, whether it was a birthday or something we'd done that we were celebrating, and we went out, and I say, and we ended up at a strip club, and I can still remember sitting there thinking, why am I at a a strip club. And it's like, and I never went again. But my colleagues, they didn't think anything of that. So it never occurred to them. And it's not because like now I still have connections and friends from that thing. If I brought that up now, they'd be mortified if I reminded them about, do you remember, seriously mortified. So, but it was just normal. That's what we did. Yeah. And I guess, we've changed a lot since then. So I think that is great.
Thank God.
Yes, exactly. But there's still a long way to go. I think we just recently had International Women's Day, and we've still got, we've still only got 6, women CEOs in the FTSE 100 and 15 in the top FTSE 350, and we have no women of colour at all.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So it's so when you look at it like that, you're a bit like, well, what have we achieved? It feels too slow, doesn't it? So
definitely.
So definitely still a lot of work to be done.
Yeah. How did you, I guess, like you were saying, a lot of those early roles, you were the only woman in the room. There were those types of situations like you've just explained there. How did you kind of push through that? Did you have some great role models or leaders that you looked up to, or kind of, how did you kind of navigate that path?
So I think in my early career, to be honest, I didn't see it, because I think when you first start and it's so one-sided, I think not everyone, but I think in the main, you just want to fit in and get your job done. So I think that doesn't help, because it takes a while maybe for you to even realise this is not normal. So there's a delay already there, isn't there, between you getting on and realising. So, but I think it comes back to, I think, what you mentioned before about resilience. I think sometimes you just have to have resilience, and also not get angry at the world for not being how it should be. That will never get you where you need to be. So because otherwise you'll just be angry all the time. So I think you have to embrace what you're seeing is good. And then when you see bad behaviour, I've often said to a lot of women that I've spoke to, sometimes it just tells you need to change jobs. Sometimes it's so baked into where you are that maybe just acknowledging it's not the environment for you, and that's not a sign of weakness or failure. That is just accepting that actually this is a place that's just going to upset me, like continually. It's not somewhere I can be myself or comfortable. So actually finding somewhere you can, and I do think there are more and more companies where you can find that, which is great. So I've often said that I think it's not always about having to jump up and down. Sometimes it's like looking around you and thinking,
just taking yourself out of the situation, basically. I think you could say that even if you weren't actually moving companies per se, you could just, you're in a meeting room and there's bad behavior going on, just take yourself out, remove yourself. Like there's no need to tolerate. I think it's the tolerance perspective, isn't it?
Yes, and I think sometimes that can be more effective, and also maybe a bit easier for people to do than to always have to be someone that's. So some people are comfortable speaking out, but it is probably 3%. And so instead of putting that pressure on yourself, to your point, maybe, and even if it's like, literally, I actually, just need to leave, really sorry, I've got to go early on this meeting. So you don't even need to make a big thing of it. Yeah. And you can talk about it with your boss afterwards. You can say, actually found that incredibly uncomfortable. Yeah. So you
save yourself the sanity, really.
I think it's okay to find I think it's okay to take the pressure off yourself and to find a slightly easy route through. I don't think you have to take this world on your shoulders.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think you'll find that like a tough way to go about it. And I don't think that's what I did. I think I kind of worked my way around, through, under, over.
Yeah. No, I think that's a smart way to do it. And I think it's interesting. I know we were chatting on Monday just about the FS industry in general and what we can do to make it more appealing to women. I think we were saying like the healthcare system has done such an amazing job. You see such an even split, sometimes even more women. What is it about the FS industry that's still, I don't know, a bit intimidating for women? And
we were talking about it, weren't we? And I think it's because in the health sector, so in the medical profession and also in veterinary science, they I would say it's swung the other way, in terms of the male female split, whereas we just haven't seen, I think, very much change at all in that same period. And we were talking about it, and I think it's because we're not seen as an industry to be making a difference to people's lives enough. So whereas the medical profession, the veterinary profession, and I think it is attractive for women, in that, we have an innate, I think, ability to care and to share and to communicate. I think it's in us to do that. And I think we're drawn sometimes to being able to share that. But, the medical world and the veterinary world is certainly not having trouble with STEM, because they are very, technical areas, but they've managed to crack it. And I personally think it's because people can see they can make a difference, where that's actually quite a bad reflection on financial services, that we're not seen as an industry that helps people, when actually it's all about people's money and them being better off. How are we not seen, as an industry to help people? So that's something I think we need to take on the chin a bit. And definitely. I think if we could fix that, we would be surprised at how we would then attract, I think, a much broader group of people.
I think that's, for me, that's what fintechs are doing at the moment, really. It's like connecting to the real issues that consumers have, and taking those and really connecting with them. And I think that kind of thing you don't really see from the big incumbents, that you don't see that kind of like the heart, that kind of connection. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think there's...
I don't know. I see a lot of fintechs with a lot of men.
Yeah.
And then I see some of the bigger incumbents really making changes to, women in leadership and putting a lot of effort and training into helping women get through, the different kind of journeys that they end up, having, which would normally divert them, and trying to keep them and hold them, bring them back, and make it easy to come back. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about that, actually.
Yeah.
I'd like to be more positive, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah.
But it'll be a good, many positives coming off if the FS industry does kind of hone down on explaining the value and the benefit and all the great things they're doing for customers. Yes. And that will also hopefully make it more attractive to more women and more people in general to join the sector.
You are right. The fintechs are probably driving that change that might attract more.
Yeah.
So to your point,
I think
it might
that's...
make a difference more. But so then we will have more women joining the industry. So yes, you're right. I think that is what... Yes, that's
I think that's where I was sort of thinking about the connection.
You're like, yeah.
No, I think you're right.
Thanks for explaining my point, Lydia. No, that's super interesting. And I guess now, listening, our podcast is essentially aimed and targeted at, young entrepreneurs, maybe thinking of coming into fintech, it may not be, or anyone who's just interested in financial services. But what would you sort of recommend to our listeners of, motivating them to come into the fintech space, particularly if they are a woman? What would be sort of your wise words of wisdom to them?
Well, I think for me, financial services is just such a fascinating world. In fact, and you never stop learning, which is lovely. So, the more you know, the more you don't know, because it's such a deep, rich world. So it's an industry that you'll always be able to learn, develop, and to your point, move around so that you're actually doing different things, which a lot of people like. They like variety and they like development. So, I mean, from that perspective, it's such an attractive industry. And on top of that, we really do need to help people with their money, like fundamentally, no matter whether it's pensions, savings, lending. It doesn't matter what area of the industry you end up working in. It's because consumers need more help. And if we could attract some of the women in to do that, I think we would also accelerate that. And also I would say that you've just got to be a bit braver not to be put off by an industry that, as I said, when I was at this Barclays meeting, there was like absolutely no idea. It could have been talking in German. It's like, I mean, literally, I was like, had no idea. And yet it hasn't prevented me from getting to where I've got. So I would say, just don't let it put you off,
Yeah, it's a learning curve.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we were saying again when we were chatting the other day, be open-minded. That really is the kind of gateway to kind of allowing all these benefits to come through, if you kind of make sure you are open-minded throughout. Brilliant. And as well, I mean, I guess just quickly on the women in leadership thing, I think as well, seeing role models like yourself who are doing amazing things leading these companies, I think the more people can see themselves represented in those roles, the more we'll see that push and the change. So I think that's great to see. And I'd just like to ask, you see the role CEO, it's such an impressive title. What is technically the role of a CEO? I guess what do you do kind of on a day-to-day basis to kind of be the leader at Moneyhub?
So it's so funny that you asked me that, because we have this in Moneyhub, we have coffee and chat, which is a a random pairing between two people in the company, and then you have half an hour once a month, with your random pairing. And one day my random pairing said to me exactly that. They said, what does the CEO do? And I sat there and I thought, I have no idea. I mean, it goes from one thing, genuinely. And so then I said to him, I think the easiest way for me to show you what I do is to show you my diary for the last 2 weeks, and I'll just show you because I thought to myself, it is quite varied. That's partly probably because it's a fintech, so you get to do more than in the role. It's broader than what you would do because it narrows. The bigger the company, in effect, the narrower your role becomes, and that's in any company. It's just how it works. So at the moment, I would say as CEO of Moneyhub is quite a broad role. It's got a lot of external facing, work that you need to do. It's got a lot of work that we do internally on culture and on also driving the lines of business that we've set up to address all the different areas of the market we want to do. Yeah. It's really trying to help those lines of business be successful. So that would be my main focus, if you like, right now. Yeah. But what my main focus was 2 years ago, or in 2 years, will definitely evolve.
So interesting. Yeah, you do hear that a lot, don't you? That like there's just no structure. There's always just, you're sometimes you're putting out fires, sometimes you're having, business development, and it's so varied. And just before we do go into our sort of fire round, I wanted to ask you what sort of been your proudest moment being CEO at Moneyhub over the last 8 years?
Oh, my proudest
Gotta pick one.
I've got to pick one.
Yeah, sorry.
One. Well, can we come back to it? Can we think about it? Keep going.
Okay.
We'll go on to some more fire round questions.
Yeah,
putting you on the spot.
We'll put that at the end of the fire round, especially for
give
you.
Time to think of it. But like Panisse said, we like to end every episode with 3 fire round questions, just to kind of sum up some of your experience and just get some kind of answers on some key things I think we're interested to know. So firstly, what do you want to be known for?
Getting stuff done.
Like that. It's good.
Oh, nice, being productive.
Yeah.
Love it.
Second one is, if you could change one thing about the industry, what would it be?
Diversity.
Nice.
More diversity, yeah.
And then finally, what is a book, podcast, show that's inspired you that you recommend to our listeners?
Apart from this one.
That's what we wanted to hear.
Yeah, excluding this one. I would say it's a book I read. I mean, I obviously read a lot of books and there's a lot of podcasts, so it's a little bit tricky. But I thought about it because you gave me time. and I thought it's got to be Let It Go by Dame Stephanie Shirley, which is she also goes by the name of Steve Shirley, and she was well ahead of her time. So in the 60s, she was coding along with women and their babies in her front room, and she started the business that we now know as Soprasteria.
Oh, I love that.
It's been through a lot of incarnations, but if you read her book, it is like, it's quite amazing. And on top of that, when you think what she was doing in the 60s, which we're now not doing, it's like you almost wonder, well, what happened? And someone said to me, because I actually said to someone, I don't know how we went from that to not progressing the way we did. And someone said that kind of like the IBM culture came in, literally suited and booted, 9 to 5 in the office, well, probably 9 to 7. 9 to 8, but you know what I mean. It came in, and that meant this demographic were pushed out. So anyway, I would just say it's well worth a read. It's very uplifting.
I'm going to put that one on my list. So last but not least, I'm going to ask you again, what's been your proudest moment? It'll be a lovely note to end our podcast on.
I think that probably my proudest achievement at Moneyhub is the growth in the people. So, I mean, you always achieve lots of things with the product because it's such an amazing product. So I feel like you're gifted. But I think the fact that we've gone from 12, to 140 people, and we've managed to keep our culture in that growth. And everyone keeps saying to me, how do you do that? And I think it's because we have we've really made we have collaborative, agile and nurturing, so it's can do, so it's it is our culture. And what I think I'm probably most proud of is that there are advocates in Moneyhub that will say to a new colleague that's joined, that's not how we write an email at Moneyhub. It's not the Moneyhub way. Because there is a way of being kind, going about things in the right way. And actually sometimes, people don't know how to operate in a business. They join, maybe there's a limited filter and they've got to learn, haven't they?
Yeah, exactly.
And so the fact that we've got advocates all through Moneyhub that are like, that this is how we do it, this is why. And then you end up baking in, don't you, a culture that when people join, they find it comfortable, enjoyable, but also that means the business gets the most productive measures from, because when you're comfortable and you're enjoying what you do, I think you're at your very best.
100%.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's an achievement, because I feel like a 140 size company, that's really tricky to kind of maintain that really strong culture. Something that because we're obviously 15 people big right now with like big growth plans. And I think that is kind of one of the USPs of Woodhurst, is we have such an amazing culture. People have the space to thrive, but we're constantly thinking about how do we maintain that when we're 50. So that's great to see that you've managed to do it.
You'll have to write a book for us and let us know how it's done. Thank you so much, Sam. It's been a pleasure getting to know you. And we're excited to see what's next for Moneyhub.
Well, thank you for having me. It's great. It's always good fun.